We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View starts right now.
Across America, live, this is Point of View. And now, Kerby Anderson.
Thank you for joining me. It is the weekend edition. Of course, it's also Halloween and Reformation Day and a variety of other things. So lots to talk about, but certainly we are in the midst of a government shutdown, which has gone on for the entire month of October. If you're keeping score there at home, we'll talk about what that might mean in just a few minutes. Also going to be looking at some religious liberty cases, also what's been going on in terms of the attempt to try to crack down on crime in our urban areas, and a variety of other topics that we will get into, because there is quite a lot to cover. We'll do our best to cover as much as we can, and if not, some of it gets bumped to next week. In studio with me is Liberty McArtor, who is the host of Point of View and also the host of the Know Why podcast, and Jeff Mateer, Executive Vice President, Chief Legal Counsel. Jeff, always great to have you here, and we always love to start off with religious liberty cases, and the first one is about a nativity scene. Now, I remember back in the old days, since we're the old guys around here, that Pawtucket, Rhode Island said you could only have a nativity scene if you had reindeers, Santa, maybe snowmen, or I got to be politically correct, snow people. But I thought that has all changed, and yet you are going to talk about the fact that a live nativity scene was something that was still controversial.
Yeah, I mean, this is another example of where folks on the ground don't realize that there are Supreme Court cases that impact how they look at the law. And so in the city in Ohio, unfortunately, a lady, our client, decided, Susan Conley decided they have a Christmas theme farmers market. And she thought, well, what better at a Christmas theme farmers market than actually have like maybe a nativity scene that demonstrates what Christmas is about. And so the city said, well, you can do the Christmas theme market, just no nativity scene. So you can have Christmas, but no Jesus. I mean, no baby Jesus. I mean, it really gets, it's silly. It's silly.
I wonder if city employees get Christmas Day off. It seems so, it seems shocking, even though I know this isn't the first time that First Liberty has even dealt with something like this. But people have just forgotten that that's what we celebrate. That's what the majority of the people in the United States are celebrating, Christmas. It is a religious holiday.
Yeah, and I think that this is happening at Halloween of all time. So
yes.
You got October 31st, which is my favorite, and I wish I had pulled it here. My favorite Justice Scalia quote comes from a case. I think it comes from a case called Lamb's Chapel. But in that case, Justice Scalia is talking about, and everybody listens to Point of View knows about the lemon test, right?
Yes, right.
So the lemon test was this test from the early 70s that misinterpreted the Establishment Clause. And what Justice Scalia said in Lamb's Chapel about the lemon test was that it was a ghoul that kept rising because we thought it was dead and it would rise. And,
a zombie.
My Boston friend today sent a little note to the staff at First Liberty and said, it's Halloween. People obviously it's Halloween. And that it reminded him of that Justice Scalia quote. And the good news is our Coach Kennedy case, once and for all, killed the ghoul known as the lemon test. I do have a little bit of an update on the Ohio case. The mayor has now said that and who knows how many, in light of the public pressure on him, he has now said, "Oh, this was just a misunderstanding."
Oh, of course.
Of course, the nativity scene can come, and we've said that is great. We'd like to see you amend your policies and teach your employees how to actually follow the First Amendment. So that we'll take that as a victory as soon as we get that written confirmation from the mayor. We also had the candidate for governor, Ramaswamy, actually spoke out on this as well.
And so Ramaswamy certainly did.
Yeah. And so a lot of good pressure. But, this is another example where we've got to educate people that there's nothing wrong with public expressions of faith. We don't have to, oh my gosh, it's Christmas, and we're going to actually show Jesus, and as you said, Liberty, I think that's the point. We ought to ask the employee who denied this. We assume you're working on December 25th, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And again, I mentioned that, but for Liberty or some of our younger listeners, when the Pawtucket, Rhode Island case came down, it was so lampooned because it was called the three reindeer case. In other words, it's okay to have a nativity scene in Jesus as long as you had like some reindeer and some other things. So it was part of a full Christmas celebration. Here you have a Christmas celebration, but the only thing that wasn't allowed was the nativity scene. And I brought that up in some parts, Liberty, because we know there will be other cases like this, don't we? And you've worked at First Liberty, and of course you work here now, but you see the need for us to educate all the listeners so that if you hear today that a nativity scene was shut down in your community, there's actually a way in which you can get some relief from that particularly erroneous decision.
Yeah, it's something that I think families should be talking about, even with young kids, as soon as they can comprehend the conversation, because obviously kids are going to be excited about Christmas. And in many towns, you will drive by and you'll see nativity scenes out, or you might go to one of those live nativity scenes, petting zoos type events, which are very fun. And then you can say, and guess what? We're so blessed to live in the United States where we have a constitution that we can do this kind of thing. Because I think sometimes people just don't think about talking about that with their kids. But that's a conversation you can and should start very early on.
Well, again, let me just say that before we go to a break, that when we come back, we're going to talk about a Colorado teen that's fighting to repaint a school parking lot space. And I think we've been down this one before. It's deja vu all over again. But I thought I would add something to it, and that is her justification for what she wanted to do was because of the impact that Charlie Kirk had on her life. And I was at a meeting the other day where we got talking about all the different examples we have of what's called the Charlie Kirk effect. But also, I thought it was kind of interesting. Some of our listeners may know that we have the vice president of stewardship that lives in Colorado Springs, and she drove over to actually look at that painted area. So you can go on the website, and as we go to a break, first of all, find out about the issue of course, the nativity scene, in case you have something that may be surfacing in your community as well. And once we get that nice letter from the mayor, who says it was just a clerical error, and we're going to clarify that. You can use that as well. And, of course, all the great material there at First Liberty. And, of course, you can also go to firstliberty.org. But the second one is you might want to look at it right now because you can see what we're talking about. And who would have known that anything from a nativity scene to having something that had a religious symbol or a scripture verse would be controversial. So we'll come back, and we've talked about that before in another venue, but we'll talk about it and what is happening in Colorado. And then we'll move on because we are now 31 days into a government shutdown, and I don't see it ending anytime soon, but I know by tomorrow some things are going to happen that certainly will be in the news as well. Lots to talk about. We'll cover all that right after this.
This is Viewpoints with Kerby Anderson.
An article about Wikipedia began like this. I launched the site in 2001. Today it's been captured by anonymous editors who manipulate articles to fit their ideological bias. was written by Larry Sanger, who says Wikipedia was founded on an idealistic mission to provide the world's information for free. The evidence for left-wing bias can be found, for example, in the platform's list of reliable sources: MSNBC, The Nation, Mother Jones, and The New Republic. Unreliable sources are Fox News, The New York Post, and The Federalist. He proposed 9 theses to return Wikipedia to its original vision. These include enabling competing articles, abolishing source blacklists, and a revival of the original neutrality policy. He's also calling for more accountability. That can be achieved, he argues, by revealing who Wikipedia's leaders are. There are 62 accounts with the most authority, but only 14% of those accounts reveal a full, real name. He also wants to allow the public to rate articles posted by Wikipedia and provide feedback. He laments that the original consensus model for decision-making has been turned into a tool used to stifle dissent and consolidate power. The original idea was to lay out plurality of viewpoints in a coherent and balanced way. His comments come at a time when Congress has been investigating Wikipedia. The focus of their investigation has been on the allegation that foreign entities have manipulated Wikipedia entries. Complaints about bias in Wikipedia articles is not new. I first started writing about them 16 years ago. What is new has been the complaints from one of the founders of Wikipedia. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
For a free copy of Kerby's booklet, A Biblical View on Critical Race Theory, go to viewpoints.info/CRT. You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Back once again, Liberty McArtor and Jeff Mateer in studio with us today. Second article, Colorado teen wins fight to repaint school parking space with Christian design after legal challenge. And if you go to that particular article, it is one that's on Fox News. It says the high schooler was inspired by Charlie Kirk to fight back against this idea of a ban on a religious parking space. We've heard this before, but here we go again.
Yeah, it is. So I think you quoted the last segment. You quoted the great Yogi Berra, right? Deja vu all over again, and it is sort of like that. And quite frankly, actually, Sophia saw the earlier story.
Yes,
and that's why she reached out. So our last one was in the state of New York, and eventually we pointed out the errors of the school district in that case, and our client was able to paint her space. Same thing here. What's interesting, this is Colorado Springs, right? And so
I know.
I mean, Colorado Springs. I mean, that's like Catholics have Rome and Vatican and us,
Notre Dame, whatever.
Yeah, and us evangelicals have Colorado Springs, right? That's sort of the home. But here, the school district, public school in Colorado Springs, denied Sophia the ability to have any sort of religious theme in her parking space, like so many places. And I know my kids did this at their school. You know, right as a senior, you have your own parking space, and you get to put on there anything you want, and obviously it can't be obscene, it can't be vulgar, but that's the problem here. They have these rules. It can't be obscene, it can't be vulgar, and it can't be religious. In other words, obscenity equals religion,
That's
which we
exactly
know we know that's absolutely wrong, and that's called religious viewpoint discrimination, and then the First Amendment prohibits that. But unfortunately, a lot of school districts don't know that, and here's even one in Colorado Springs who told Sophia of all the messages, it was a design with sheep, and her point was Jesus's parable of the lost sheep. And so what was neat when she reached out to us and we got to hear her story, because we always asked our clients, well, what? Because a lot of people just, think about it. A lot of people would just do whatever their school told them, right?
Yeah.
But she was not willing to do that. And the reason was she was inspired by Charlie Kirk. And even before his murder, that he had been important to her. But of course, with the events that happened earlier this year, earlier this fall, that really is that she wanted to take a stand for her faith, and she felt strongly about that. And just if the viewers see the Fox News story or have an opportunity to watch her, just a lovely young lady who very strong convictions, was willing to stand. And of course, this is one in which, again, after we pointed out to the school district that the First Amendment even applies in Colorado, they have reversed their policy, and the good is not only for Sophia, but now they've reversed their policy for every student in that school district, which is a pretty Colorado Springs school district. It's pretty large. So every student now is impacted. And actually, they gave every student the ability to go back and, if they wanted to redo their spaces, they can do it. So huge win.
Yeah, and you wonder what student maybe or students wish that they could add religious imagery, and now they will be able to do that and feel comfortable doing it. And I was just thinking when I was reading this story, like how proud I am of Sophia for taking that stand. And it is encouraging to see more young people. And I know that for many of them, Charlie Kirk has been a huge inspiration, but really being bold in their faith like that and saying, I do want to express my faith. It's a way to paint your parking space. It may seem small, but it is a way to allow students to express themselves. And if they can't express their, most fundamental beliefs, then you're saying you actually can't express yourself. So I'm really proud of her for standing up. And again, it's an encouragement to everybody to take that stand, even if it maybe seems small, because it really does matter and it protects religious freedom for somebody else.
Again, the Academy School District 20 said that they're going forward to keep things clear and fair to all students and seniors. They would be allowed to repaint those spaces. And again, they will allow artwork based on the student's viewpoint. There's viewpoint discrimination, right? About topics such as religion, as long as they don't get into the other issues, offensive and rude. And it just reminds me, one of the things I remember years ago, Jeff, talking with an individual that had been an ACLU lawyer, became a Christian. And I said, there's a sense that I always got that you treated religion almost like pornography. You treated religion like profanity because you used it in the same sentence. And again, we see these various programs and these various policies that really do treat religion as if it's something offensive.
No, and to me, which the First Amendment prohibits. I mean, this idea that somehow religion is offensive. I mean, in the words of this policy, what else was? So what were the guidelines? You couldn't have offensive, rude language, references to drugs, weapons, or gangs, and religion.
Wow.
So on the list of things you can't have,
what are you saying to the students?
And then what does that? Yeah, exactly. Yeah. What does that say to a student when a person of no faith or any faith that just religion is bad? Religion is equivalent to something that's offensive, to drugs, to weapons, to gangs. It's another bad category. So I mean, we're excited that the Colorado Springs School District has fixed this. Because it needed to be fixed. And again, this is another example of we were successful in a case, got out some media on it, others see. And so I hope this does encourage other students to take a stand. And something that you mentioned, Kerby, it also, it's as you said, the Charlie Kirk impact, the impact of Charlie Kirk. and how many young people like Sophia are now just saying, you know what, I believe this, and when I'm told something that doesn't sit right, I'm not going to do it. We were reminded today. First Liberty is hosting an event later in November, in which they're bringing back one of our clients that was one of my first cases for First Liberty, a young lady named Angela Hildenbrand. I don't know, Liberty, if you remember Angela, or if you were with us, but she was told to take references to God out of her graduation speech. She was valedictorian of a high school outside of San Antonio, and that was one of the first cases I got to work on as an employee, a lawyer at First Liberty, and we're so excited. She's now 30.
Wow.
And we're excited. But she's another. I mean, that's another. I mean, it just didn't sit right with her when a school district is saying, take out religion. Obviously, that's many years ago, I guess 12 years ago. But we still have it today. We probably will have it in the future. But what's good today is we now have a lot better legal precedents than we did 12 years ago. And so Sophia and that's why the school district backed down within days. But someone had to tell them, or they wouldn't have backed down.
Mm-hmm. And again, Liberty just gets into the fact that this wouldn't have happened if she had not stood up and did this. So whether it's a valedictorian, the Kuntz cheerleaders comes to mind, a young lady that said you couldn't pray except behind a curtain, all sorts of other individuals where you can't share your faith if you're a blind woman in a park, and on and on and on. You can't pray at the 50-yard line, on and on. Just it seems like each time we have gained these successes in religious liberty, they're due to the courage of at least one or more individuals standing up and saying, wait a minute, I'm not going to stand for that. We do have a right to actually stand up and speak to this issue.
And to Jeff's point, it seems like many of these places of authority, whether they be towns or cities or school districts, maybe they are aware of the precedent, maybe they're not, but they aren't going to honor it, and maybe unless their feet are put to the fire a little bit. And so, again, it's an opportunity to educate, to be confident that thanks to organizations like First Liberty, you do have that right, and to stand up, because then, again, in cases like this, very quickly resolved, oh, yes, of course we'll honor your constitutional freedom. But if you hadn't said anything, then easier to ask for forgiveness maybe than just do the right thing the first time. So just stand up for it.
We're going to take a break, and when we come back, we are going to talk about the shutdown, because we've had a whole month without the government. And it reminds me of Mitch Daniels say, when the government shuts down, you'll be surprised how much you don't miss it. But anyway, this has been an entire month of a shutdown. We do have a take action, if you haven't already done so, to actually tell your 2 senators and your representative to actually prevent Government Shutdowns Act of 2025. We mentioned Charlie Kirk. We have that video of Charlie Kirk's message that he gave at our 50th anniversary gala. We have some viewpoints, commentaries, mine and Penna's there as well. But when we come back, what about this shutdown, and what happens tomorrow in November 1st when all of a sudden people who are depending on food assistance programs, the cupboard will be bare? What will happen then? We'll talk about that right after this.
At Point of View, we believe there is power in prayer, and that is why we have relaunched our Pray for America campaign, a series of weekly emails to unite Americans in prayer for our nation. Imagine if hundreds of thousands of Americans started praying intentionally together on a weekly basis. You can help make that a reality by subscribing to our Pray for America emails. Just go to pointofview.net and click on the Pray for America banner that's right there on the homepage. Each week you'll receive a brief news update, a specific prayer guide, and a free resource to equip you in further action. We encourage you to not only pray with us each week, but to share these prayers and the resources with others in your life. Join the movement today. Visit pointofview.net and click on the banner Pray for America right there at the top. That's pointofview.net. Let's pray together for God to make a difference in our land. Point of View will continue after this. You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is Kerby Anderson.
Back once again this weekend, talk about the shutdown. We had a debate the other day. It is the longest full shutdown in history. It's the second longest shutdown, but by next week it will be the longest one if this tends to continue. And so, Liberty, let me come to you for just a minute because we've got a piece that I've posted here of nothing else. If you don't watch CNN, one of the most enthusiastic people dealing with opinions and data is Harry Eaton, and here is where he points points out that the shutdown is not helping the Democrats, actually seems to be helping the Republicans.
Yeah, I doubt that is what Democrats have had in mind when they decided to, go down this path. But one of the interesting things is that approval ratings for Republicans are going up, not just with their base, but among independents too.
Yes.
And so this is not a good time or season for Democrats to be losing support, and especially for more independents to actually, swing away from potentially voting Democrat and leaning more toward Republican. So I think you're starting to see a lot of pressure, even from friendly sides, so to speak, to say, hey, let's go ahead and wrap this up because I think the American people are a little bit over it.
Yes. I kind of hate to even think that I'm saying this, but I do believe that Jeff Mateer is right, in which he said a couple of months ago that you could close down the government for an entire month and hardly anybody would notice. And we have closed the government down for an entire month. And there have been a few people that have noticed, but not many. But tomorrow, a lot of people might notice.
Yeah, I think tomorrow. So tomorrow, and this, think of this staggering number: 43 million Americans receive SNAP, and we know, Kerby, Liberty might remember, that used to just be called food stamps.
Food stamps, yeah.
And
Supplemental Nutritional Assistance Program, SNAP.
Yeah,
okay.
Food stamps.
Food stamps. That's all
the
it
ability,
is.
and obviously you can't buy liquor. There's certain restrictions,
right.
But essentially it's so people with low incomes are able to get food. Well, that program starting tomorrow is not funded anymore.
Yeah.
And so 43 million.
I had no idea.
That's a huge number of people. That's going to be 43 million people who are not happy.
Yes.
Right? They're not going to be happy. And look, on the serious side, that means their children are going to go to bed in the next few days hungry. And let's be clear, this is the Democrats. I try to be relatively, but this one, I try to be relatively even-handed. Obviously, I'm a conservative and right of center, but on this one, it's unmistakable. This is the Democrats. The Democrats are holding the country hostage, and so if someone is not getting their government benefit, it's because of the Democrats. And I think that's what that poll is showing with regard to the independents. The people who are in the center are even realizing that this is an issue created by the Democrats. The Republicans have made proposals that would have, for instance, continued these type of programs, and the Democrats want nothing. They want all or nothing. And so I think it's going to change. I now think with this and the other thing that's coming up, and I did not fly this week, but some of my colleagues flew this week, and I think that some of the different access points into DFW, they're being closed, and so that means there are more lines, longer time. No doubt people are missing flights. I've also heard firsthand accounts of people being delayed, and the pilots even saying it's because there are not enough air traffic controllers. And so this is going to mount, especially as we get closer to Thanksgiving, more people travel.
Yeah. People are not going to be happy, like you said. So practically speaking, just until they get this sorted out, go to whatever your town or local church's food bank in and make some extra donations, because those are going to be hit up a lot in the next few days until they get this sorted. But and I could be wrong on this, but if I'm understanding correctly, the Republicans have even said that they want to address the thing that the Democrats are shutting down the government over, just not right now. Just let's deal with this right now, and then we can deal with the other things too. So it seems like a weird place to put a stake in the ground and say that we're going to shut the government down continually over this right now. Well,
and the reason, and listeners maybe think, well, I thought the Republicans have the majorities in the Senate and the House. Well, they do, but there's something called the filibuster, which would require in the Senate 60 votes. And I guess the latest vote, we peeled 3 Democrats, I believe, is what it is.
55, 52 and 3, yeah.
Georgia, Pennsylvania, and I don't know who the third was, but 3 Democrats to getting closer, but not enough. Although the president either last night, because sometimes he's on his Truth Social, even in the early hours, or maybe he's just up early. He's an early morning person. Was saying it's time to get rid of the filibuster, which we did for judicial nominations. Yeah. Actually, the Democrats did for judicial nominations. That sounds good today.
But Republicans don't want to do that.
But if we ever lose again and we're not able to stop bad legislation, I'm not so sure I'd be against doing away with the filibuster. Instead, I think, I would encourage listeners. It's time to contact, especially if you're in a blue state that has blue representatives. Your congressman is a Democrat or your senators are Democrats. Contact them and say that enough is enough. Yes. Get back to work.
And again, if you go to our website, the middle section there is about the Prevent Government Shutdowns Act, but you could just modify that and simply say, I think this is the long-term solution, but my short-term one is let's get back to work. We need the United States Senate to do what they're going to do. But Liberty, let me come back to you for just a minute, because you have one woman here on one of the social media saying, I'm going to tell you straight like this. I can't even use half the words she's using, but basically she's saying, I'm going to go in the grocery store, I'm going to fill up my cart and just walk right out. Another one simply says, I'm going to Walmart, I'm going to grab anything I want, I'm going to put it in the basket, I'm going to walk right out. Are we just one edge away from individuals who don't think about going to the local food bank, of just simply saying, we're going to exercise some level of civil disobedience we haven't seen in a long time?
Oh, I think the barrier is very low for that, because you already see rioting and looting happen. Obviously, this is not a violent situation, but I think people are definitely inclined to do that, and they're not happy. And even with regard to federal employees, I mean, there are a lot of people who, this is a long time to go without pay. And so if you've got savings, then good for you. But otherwise, how are you paying your bills right now? How are you feeding your family too? And so I think more and more people are feeling the effects of this. And I wouldn't be surprised at all if you saw some disobedience like that.
Well, and you're seeing a change too. The unions are now, I mean, who's been more loyal to the Democratic Party since the 1930s?
Yeah.
Right. And maybe before, but certainly since then. But the unions now are starting to turn and saying, enough is enough. Go get back to your jobs. I did say, as you're talking about, groceries and people not paying. Well, when Madami wins in New York on Tuesday, which it looks like he probably is, well, he wants to, doesn't he want to privatize all the grocery stores, or wants to, he's basically going to force the grocery stores out of business with his policies, and which will only create more problems for people in New York. But that's a big election. Obviously, our listeners in Virginia, major elections in Virginia for governor and attorney general and lieutenant governor. So lots going on. That's some speculation too, is that the Democrats after Tuesday, so the election, there are some what they perceive to be important elections on Tuesday. With SNAP expiring and people not doing that, more chaos at our airports. And you read when you have CNN highlighting that Republicans are doing well, you have NPR highlighting that Republicans are doing well, but then it's turning, and there's a lot of pressure on the Democrats.
Let's open up the phones. I want to get your thoughts. You might be one of those 43 million that receive SNAP benefits and are saying, what am I going to do tomorrow? But maybe you have some thoughts about that as well. And this, of course, also goes into our next article. Cal Thomas, please turn off the lights, because, of course, he is talking about New York and New Jersey, and that is an interesting race there with the governorship in New Jersey. But this one that Star Parker went through, she said, listen, we got rent control from Mamdani, as well as free buses, free child care, city-owned grocery stores. He said the only thing missing is free ice cream, and we're going to pay for it all by taxing the wealthy, which brings us into that phrase that Cal Thomas uses. I did not know that they came from Seattle back in 1971 when Boeing was laying off employees. They said, just turn off the lights. And then when you had the oil embargo in 1970, 1973, you had the same phrase. Of course, those of us who watch NFL, sometimes they talk about turn off the lights, which is a soul song, but there is a sense in which these elections may cause an exit from some of these cities and states. So we'll talk about that right after these important messages.
Our universities have been moving leftward for decades. William F. Buckley warned of the drift in his 1951 book, God and Man at Yale. Conservatives advocating reform have mostly been ignored. Families who want to avoid the prevailing leftist indoctrination can seek out Christian colleges or schools that refuse federal funding. But most chose based upon prestige, family legacies, or scholarship offers. Many parents were unaware of how socialists' long march through the institutions would affect their offspring. After the 2020 George Floyd riots, universities ramped up their DEI policies. Then, 2 years ago, campus celebrations of Hamas terror began. University officials were interrogated. Their masks came off. Some schools lost federal funding. Others faced the possibility of losing such subsidies. Earlier this year, the Manhattan Institute's Christopher Rufo brought together 40-plus scholars, intellectuals, and policy leaders to formulate what he calls a practical vision for reform. They came up with the Manhattan Statement on Higher Education. Consequently, in early October, the White House offered universities a compact under which, in order to receive funding preferences, universities must return to their historic duty to advance the public good. Now, Manhattan Institute's City Journal has come out with a report which assesses schools on qualities that go well beyond those measured in U.S. News and World Report and other traditional college rankings. The report measures free speech, how the school handles politics on campus, and students' professional success after graduation. A Wall Street Journal editorial praises the new report for awarding higher marks to colleges that have demonstrated ideological pluralism among the faculty, for their vibrant and inclusive campus social life, and for fostering student tolerance for controversial speakers. No surprise, not one Ivy League school made the top 10. For Point of View, I'm Penna Dexter.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
One of our other articles is by our good friend Cal Thomas, and he points out that the phrase about turning off the lights when one leaves was originated, and I did not know this, back in 1971 when Boeing was laying off employees and two real estate agents said in Seattle, well, turn off the lights when you leave. And, of course, we've had some others. 2 years later had the oil boycotts, and, again, those of us around the table remember that. I'm sure that's before Liberty's time, but, again, they were saying turn off the lights in Houston. Well, the argument that Cal Thomas is making and the argument that Stephen Moore, who's been on the program with us as well, is making, if you continue down this road with Zohan Mamdani, a 33-year-old who Ben Shapiro says has really done nothing, never held a real job, never suffered a real challenge, been handed almost everything, and also despises capitalism and is now going to pay for all of his incredibly progressive ideas by taxing the rich. Liberty, you got a feeling that some of the wealthy people in New York are going to just take off.
Yeah, I know where they're going to end up? They're going to end up in North Texas, which is where we are right now, along with everybody else in the nation who's fleeing. I actually was talking to a mom the other day who was from New York. So I think the trickle has started. But I think a lot of people are going to realize, and even some of the people I think who are excited about supporting him are going to get a rude awakening and realize that this does not make for a better New York. So many of these places where people are leaving because they can't afford it. It's not, the cities aren't safe. They feel like their government isn't really looking after their best interest. They're going to places where they can afford to live and where they can actually live a peaceful life. So I wonder when the states are going to wake up to that.
Let's, if I can, for just a minute, I'll maybe talk about the fact that you do the Know Why podcast and see if you can explain this, because this survey that came from the Cato Institute and also done by YouGov shows that 62% of Americans under the age of 30, that's 18 to 29, say they're more favorable towards socialism and not towards capitalism. And you've got this, I think, situation in which quite a number of those in what would be called Gen Z are one of the most significant voting bases for this new, possibly not yet, but probably the most likely mayor of New York City, who is a socialist and in some respects is a card-carrying member of the Democratic Socialist Party. Yeah,
well, I think a lot of it comes down to education. And we talk about education, obviously, a lot on point of view. And I really think that both higher education and even at the grade school level have failed to teach realistic economics to students. The Free Press is actually doing a really good series on this. They're doing some man-on-the-street interviews, and they are showing charts of nations around the world and how capitalism has impacted them and impacted even the most poor people in those nations, and just kind of like how it has led to so much progress. And the young people who are, have degrees, they are very, opinionated in their support for socialism. They're shocked to see this information because they've never been showed it before. And when they see, oh, wow, this does have a good effect, that's opposite of everything I've ever been told. And they've never also experienced the negative side of that, living in, a nation that people have fled because of socialism. I think another thing, too, is that so many people are experiencing personal frustration, though, because a lot of young Americans say the American dream is dead, and they are in debt. They aren't able to buy a house. And so there are some real factors, too, I think, playing into their frustration that we need to address as well, because they are upset and they don't really know who to blame, but they know that it's not working out the way it did for their parents or their grandparents.
Yeah, I think that you're exactly right about the education point. And a lot of it's, maybe it's re-education. But I'm hesitant to even say that because I don't think they were ever educated. I mean, I think you think about our public school system and how poorly that they do. I mean, do they even teach history anymore? I mean, do people learn about what happens in communist countries? And then what I like to do is let's send a big group of your contemporaries who believe that answered that they believe socialism. Let's let them go on like a year, maybe 2-year field trip to Venezuela or North Korea, and let's see how people live in those countries under socialist systems. And of course, they say, "Oh, but that we don't want that. We want another one," kind of. So, but we all know that power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely, and that's socialism, and that's why socialism doesn't work. And when you have controlled economies, but I'd love, go do a little. Let's do a little. You like that? Great. Although we may have our own experiment now because if New York City turns socialist, we may say, oh, you want to go? Then go. You have a right to travel. It's a constitutional right. You go. You don't like it in Texas? You want socialist? No. Move to New York or California. Yes. But we know it's the opposite. People from California and New York are moving here. They're moving to Florida.
You know, one of the things we've done, as you know, Liberty, our booklets, you've written some, I've written quite a number, and I've had one on socialism and one on capitalism, and I thought we need another one, but I didn't want to just have socialism or the return of socialism or Frankenstein's bride of socialism, whatever. And so I thought, well, here's an idea. There is a book that came out years ago that warned about that. It's called The Road to Serfdom. And most people don't even know anything about Friedrich Hayek. They probably think that that's the father of one of the actresses, you know, Selma Hayek. So just to educate people a little bit more, or the one that we read off the other day, the Fraser Institute, which is in Canada, they have this annual economic freedom of the world report. And they show very clearly that those countries that are the most economically free, the ones that have less government, less intrusive regulations, laws that protect private property, have a per capita income 6 times higher than countries in which those economic freedoms are not protected. And I think it's back to this issue that one of the things you're trying to do with the Know Why podcast and what we're trying to do with these booklets and what we're going to certainly have to do a lot after we finally have a Mayor Zohan Mamdani is to really let people know where this is going to take you and why this, if nothing else, could be an object lesson of why the youngest generation, which is convinced that socialism is such a good idea, is going to find out very, very quickly that it doesn't work out so well.
Yeah. And, you know, another thing to ask maybe in conversation is, you support immigration or illegal immigration or against deportation, but why is everybody coming here? and so I'm a big supporter of legal immigration, and people. It's good that people want to come to the United States. If you know they want to come to a place that is more free. So again, I think when people are presented with those facts and maybe those images, those bars and graphs that they haven't seen before and really think about it, then it's like, oh, okay, is it perfect here? No, but it's sure a lot better than a lot of other places.
You do see some people self-deporting, Ellen DeGeneres and a few others, but Rosie O'Donnell. But nevertheless, almost everybody's coming the other direction and recognizing that this is the freest country and it is one that provides such great economic opportunities. So we do need to take a break, and when we come back, we will get into some other issues. But if you'd like to join the conversation, obviously we've been covering a lot of different topics, from religious liberty to, of course, these upcoming elections, which we'll be covering some next week. As a matter of fact, Liberty, you'll be on Monday, and I'll be doing, assuming that these planes work out, a broadcast from New Mexico on Wednesday from one of our stations there, and we'll get all full analysis of what has happened in New Jersey, Virginia, New York City, and other places. So again, that is something that we'll be doing. But when we come back, I want to get into a couple of other issues, and that is, what about this, if you will, urban crackdown? I thought Edward Ring did a good job of reminding us of what's been happening in places like Washington, D.C. and Memphis, and the resistance in places like Chicago and Portland. So we'll talk about that right after these important messages.
It was not that long ago that censorship appeared to be almost inevitable. Free speech was being attacked and strangled in many places, and some of us wondered if this was the end. But now, many feel a new sense of hope, a chance for a fresh dawn. Let me caution you, now is not the time to relax. It's a time to press forward, to use this fresh opportunity to proclaim and learn how to apply truth to current issues. By the fact you're here, listening right now, that tells me that you recognize the vital role Point of View plays as a voice of truth. For more than 50 years, we've informed and equipped people who have made a real difference. And when you give to Point of View today, you breathe life into what can be a new golden era for the truth. Please, take a moment right now and invest in truth. Visit pointofview.net or give it 1-800-347-5151. That's pointofview.net. Click in now or call 1-800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this.
just wanted to tell you, too, how much I have appreciated Point of View over the years. I've always been taught that we take care of our own, and I feel like Point of View is one of our own because of the Christian worldview that you do promote. And so I have become a partner today, and I just want to thank you so much, and just God bless you for all that you do.
Listen, I wanted to make a quick comment. I'm a relatively new listener to the show, and I really kind of stumbled upon it more than anything because I'm doing some driving now that I wasn't in the past. And my comment really is, I think you guys and gals are more right on about the assessment of this country right now than anything I've heard. You know, I go home and I tell my wife, you've got to hear what they're talking about on the show. It's just so right on. And I tell my parents the same thing.
I'm 25 years old, and I started listening to Point of View about 4 years ago, and it has changed the way that I think and the way that I view the world around me.
Point of View Radio Talk Show.
Hi, this is Kerby Anderson. You know, each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging: apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View continues right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, Kerby Anderson.
Second hour today, if you'd like to join the conversation, 1-800-351-1212, 1-800-351-1212. Jeff Mateer, Liberty McArtor. And let me just mention, first of all, that this article, I think, is one that you may want to read. It could be printed out in about 2 or 3 pages, but it has the title, "The Broader Reasons for Trump's Urban Crackdown." Now, we know why, indeed, the National Guard has been sent to places like Washington, D.C., and I want to get some perspective from Jeff, because he's been there. He can kind of give us before and after. And, of course, also we've sent them to Los Angeles, Memphis, whatever. But the bottom line is that Edward Ring is reminding us it isn't just the criminal element, which it is. It's also the fact that, as he points out, America is being systematically corrupted by foreign crime organizations. And then, of course, any of the material, including my most recent booklet on political violence, reminds you that you're also dealing with Antifa, all sorts of other crime groups as well. As a matter of fact, my October 28th commentary was on Antifa, if for no other reason than you have so many individuals, whether it's Representative Dan Goldman from New York or others, saying this is a mythological organization. Even had Jimmy Kimmel, he's quite the expert on this, you might know, that says that there's no such thing as Antifa. It's a made-up organization. And I quote from Jonathan Turley in his book dealing with this issue of free speech. His book is entitled "The Indispensable Right of Free Speech in an Age of Rage." Has a whole chapter on Antifa. And when you have some people say, well, name one of the members of Antifa. Well, we know those names, but nevertheless, we are dealing with the reason for urban crackdown. And some of that is, of course, just the inevitable crime that you get in the inner city, Jeff. But what I think this article reminds us is some of it is actually coordinated by foreign gangs and foreign crime organizations.
Yeah, it's an interesting article. It's not something I haven't thought about that angle before. I mean, we just usually think about our cities are unsafe and, high crime rates. But to actually think that there is an organized effort that actually contributes to that, and that there are foreign influences, first foreign criminal networks, but also foreign nations encouraging the foreign criminal influences is something I hadn't thought about. It certainly makes sense that would be occurring. I mean, how do you destabilize America? Well, you cause a lot of chaos and make our cities unsafe. So, great observations, and actually, I'm reading it and getting ready for our show. Very troubling. I mean, it's very, very concerning because of the money that these criminal organizations have at their disposal. And obviously, in American history, you had things like the mob, who had a lot of money and influence, but this is, the money is just phenomenal that these organizations are able to gain, and mainly through drugs, but also human trafficking and other things, and to think that it's organized and not just people in Portland acting poorly, that it's actually that there's a concentrated effort to cause our cities to be unstable.
Yeah, I agree, Jeff. It was was troubling to read it, but I think it is such an important perspective too, because whether you're talking about securing the border or trying to address crime in these cities, you really do have to look at the whole picture. And each side kind of has their talking points that they revert to, but you need to dig in deeper and say what's actually going on behind the scenes that the average person on their Twitter keyboard isn't really knowing or thinking about. And then if we don't address this, what's going to be the effect of that down the road? And I think in some ways you can even look across the pond and see a lot of the horrifying things that are happening in Europe. You have no control on immigration. You have extremely unsafe environments, horrible reports and news stories coming out, every day about things happening to innocent children and things like that. And so there's just so much that could go wrong if you are not tough on crime, and including the organized crime. And I think people, too, need to realize that, well, if there's that much money and there's that much organization, then there are going to be people in our own nation, too, who are probably corrupt and a part of it in some way. And so I think any effort that the government can put toward cleaning that up is something that we should support.
I'd love to get your thoughts. You have seen it before and after in Washington, D.C. What have you noticed?
Yeah, I mean, and I would encourage people, if you're looking for, if you want to go visit an American city, my suggestion is visit D.C., because I think in the areas where, and so central D.C., where the monuments are, where the government buildings are, the presence of the National Guard has cleaned up the city, and so I think that's extremely impressive. And I haven't been to any of the other cities where the National Guard has been in place, but it shows it can be done if you have a police presence, and we know that effective policing is presence. Is so much just presence. Results in presence and engagement, and I think that's what the Trump policies have done. And I mean, we look at it from, of course, D.C., of all things, the president, I mean, that's of the federal government, has the ability and right to be there. But in other places, when you've got places like San Francisco and other major, Chicago, other cities, where the state politicians and the local politicians have so failed their people, I mean, there is no other alternative. And of course, then you read this extra layer that actually, this is not just a local issue. And it's not just a national issue. This is actually an international issue.
Let me just, as we come to a break, just mention that you might want to read this because, first of all, they remind us that nobody crosses without paying the cartels. So you know that some of them are beholden to the cartels. I think of Tom Homan, who is, of course, the border czar. I've oftentimes said that if they ever do a film about the border czar, Tom Homan should play Tom Homan because he's perfect for the role. And yet he, as a really tough guy, oftentimes when you watch an interview, talks about something that does concern him is the number of what are called gotaways. We don't know who they are. When they came to the border and actually made themselves visible, they wanted to then be brought in by the Biden administration. But what are all the people that did not want to have any contact, if you will, with border security? And some of these individuals that then, when we pick them up in places like Memphis, Chicago, Portland, even Washington, D.C., Los Angeles, and other places, they aren't here from just Mexico. They're from other places. And you wonder if, again, some of this in Edward Ring's article is just a reminder of the fact that there are a couple of other reasons that you aren't hearing about, even in the mainstream media, for why, again, Donald Trump and the Attorney General, Pam Bondi and others, say that we really need to have this crackdown and we need to send in the National Guard. So if nothing else, it's a piece that I would recommend to you to read, and it's one of those pieces we've posted on the website. When we come back, we'll get into some other issues right after this.
This is Viewpoints with Kerby Anderson.
An article about Wikipedia began like this. I launched the site in 2001. Today it's been captured by anonymous editors who manipulate articles to fit their ideological bias. It was written by Larry Sanger, who says Wikipedia was founded on an idealistic mission to provide the world's information for free. The evidence for left-wing bias can be found, for example, in the platform's list of reliable sources, MSNBC, The Nation, Mother Jones, and The New Republic. Unreliable sources are Fox News, The New York Post, and The Federalist. He proposed 9 theses to return Wikipedia to its original vision. These include enabling competing articles, abolishing source blacklists, and a revival of the original neutrality policy. He's also calling for more accountability. That can be achieved, he argues, by revealing who Wikipedia's leaders are. There are 62 accounts with the most authority, but only 14% of those accounts reveal a full, real name. He also wants to allow the public to rate articles posted by Wikipedia and provide feedback. He laments that the original consensus model for decision-making has been turned into a tool used to stifle dissent and consolidate power. The original idea was to lay out plurality of viewpoints in a coherent and balanced way. His comments come at a time when Congress has been investigating Wikipedia. The focus of their investigation has been on the allegation that foreign entities have manipulated Wikipedia entries. Complaints about bias in Wikipedia articles is not new. I first started writing about them 16 years ago. What is new has been the complaints from one of the founders of Wikipedia. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
For a free copy of Kerby's booklet, A Biblical View on Critical Race Theory, go to viewpoints.info/CRT. You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Back once again, one of the things we say around Point of View is every topic is on the table. This one is called National Review, A Time for Choosing on Anti-Semitism. And they've got a picture of Nick Fuentes and Tucker Carlson on that. But this is not a one-off because I have also seen some other material. This is from Jim Garrity talking about some of the quotes and issues there with Tucker Carlson. You have Heritage Foundation has weighed in on that. The Wall Street Journal has mentioned some things. And so, first of all, let me just mention that as much as we've appreciated Tucker Carlson, I just did a search on our website here and came up with more than 70 articles about Tucker Carlson, some of which I've quoted from his interviews, either when he was on Fox News or now when he does his own Tucker Carlson show. Most of those are positive. So, that being said, there are a number of people, and we are part of that as well, that are concerned about the fact that doing an interview with an individual who is given a platform as a white nationalist influencer and certainly spreading some things that strike us all as anti-Semitism. If you look at my booklets we've done on anti-Semitism, usually we're calling out the left because there are certainly a lot of examples there, but that doesn't ignore the fact that there's anti-Semitism on the right. And if nothing else, Jeff, this is one of the reasons why we like to have Point of View, to even recognize that you don't have to believe everything that is said on a talk show, whether on this show or on Tucker Carlson's show.
And what's disturbing of this is, and you mentioned it, Kerby, it's sort of the evolution of Tucker Carlson. I actually remember, I was trying to think, sitting here, I met him, I don't know, it's almost 15 years ago. Mm-hmm. And then followed him, and I would say was for most of his career a fan and thought he was an insightful interviewer. Did some really good, hard interviews through the years, but I don't know what has happened to him. I mean, President Trump calls him kooky Tucker Carlson, which,
yes, he does.
which he's able to label people nicknames. That's one thing. Never want to be too close to Donald Trump because you may get a nickname. But kooky Tucker Carlson, and would you have Nick Fuentes on your show?
No.
Sure, on Point of View? Of course not, because you're platforming somebody that you can't even have a reasonable conversation with someone who denies that the Holocaust happened. I mean, that's not a topic to have a discussion about. That's just that. Or calls Adolf Hitler a word that we couldn't, well, you're not supposed to say on the air, and certainly wouldn't say on Point of View, but calls Adolf Hitler really cool, but there's an F word in front of that, and that we need to execute Jews. I mean, those people do not deserve to be given a platform, and so I don't know what happened to Tucker. I have no idea. I have no idea what happened to Tucker Carlson.
Let me just jump in and get maybe even some people even more riled up, because one of the people that has spoken to this issue, interestingly enough, is Senator Ted Cruz. And he popped off with something the other day because he was talking in this case about a representative in the state of Georgia, and we all know who she is, who's kind of gone off the deep end a little bit, and also talked about Candace Owens and all sorts of other people. And he said sometimes when an individual goes against Israel, then it's almost like it becomes a package deal. All sorts of other things show up. And Tucker Carlson in his interview said that he thinks that Ted Cruz, Mike Huckabee, and all sorts of other Christian leaders who support Israel are infected with a brain virus. And these Christian Zionists, he says that's a Christian heresy, and I'm offended by that. Well, once you head down that particular fork in the road, I think some other things maybe surface. And so Ted Cruz may be wrong on that analysis, but I thought it was kind of interesting that as we're starting to see some of these individuals who are identified as part of the right, and they're starting to move in different ways that we wouldn't have imagined, I think just as we've asked for the liberals in the Democratic Party to speak out against the anti-Semitism, which is really resident there, I think it has come time for individuals that call themselves conservatives or Christians to speak out against it in terms of individuals that are conservatives.
Absolutely. And then, for those of us around the table here at Point of View and those listening too, a lot of people right now are saying no enemies to my right. But that's not correct, because we say God's word above all else. And so if you are saying things that are not true, that are against what God says, that demean people made in the image of God, then you have to take a stand for that, whether it's inside your political party or outside of it. And I just want listeners to understand from the perspective of a millennial, and I do the No Ike podcast. I spend a lot of time researching what Gen Z is talking about. The anti-Semitism among young Americans is really troubling and shocking. Just a few months ago, I saw one of the most popular podcasts on the left that I can't remember the name of it, but it's a kind of a roundtable format. A lot of, Gen Zs just kind of sitting around and discussing things. They were all praising Hitler and saying, very vile things. And now a few months later, you're basically hearing the same thing from Nick Fuentes, who is on the far right. There's really not much difference. It was also telling when Ted Cruz did his infamous interview with Tucker Carlson a few months ago, and they got into a shouting match. I saw a lot of comments and a lot of people coming out saying, wow, I actually, for the first time in my life, agree with Tucker Carlson. And it was over because they were both saying anti-Semitic things. Yeah. And so I think that for whatever reason, this is really resurfacing in our nation right now. It is resurfacing among young people. And I think this is a time for clarity. And, people who are in the conservative movement, who are in politics right now, don't be afraid to speak out against that for the sake of, widening the tent. These are not people we want in the tent. And so you really have to draw a clear line of morality and ethics here, and most of all, biblical truth.
There used to be an old line that if you had somebody said the Jews, you don't even listen to what comes after it next, and that was sort of that anti-Semitism. But this has been so tied into Israel. And again, I know we've had individuals say, I no longer will support point of view because you believe in the nation of Israel. Well, my argument is yes, you can make a biblical case. We can look at Genesis 12 and all sorts of passages. But even this article that came out from the editors of the National Review say, well, even if you just ignore all of that, just again recognize that Israel, as they say, is technologically innovative, staunchly pro-American, the heart of a strategically important region. Over these many years, because of U.S. support, Israeli actions have weakened the terrorist group of the Houthis, Hezbollah. They no longer want to get any of those pagers, right? And as well has crippled the nuclear program of Iran. And so even if you say, I reject your religious or Christian perspectives, just from a sheer strategic point of view, Israel should be our friend. Doesn't mean we would agree with everything the IDF has done in the war with Hamas, but just so much of the tendency here to pick out any criticism against Israel and turn a blind eye to everything that Russia, China, and everybody else is doing.
Yeah, and then the other thing the article doesn't mention, but I'm sure just maybe because we recognize it, it's a democracy. I mean, it's a stable democracy.
Very
it's
true.
been a stable democracy since 1948.
People have human rights there.
And yes, and they do. And again, it's not perfect. We're not perfect. The United States isn't perfect, and Israel isn't perfect either. And this is one. And I love that this article ends with a quote from George Washington and a famous letter, something that we talk about in the religious liberty realm all the time. We will cite George Washington's letter to the Jewish congregation in Newport, Rhode Island, in which George Washington explains that it's to be Jewish in America is a good thing. We want to have Jewish people live in here, and they shouldn't be threatened by the First Amendment, and that this is not a society that excludes someone because of their religious beliefs. It goes back to a core principle, and I think any time that we're making threats against someone because of their religious beliefs, and that they therefore should be, in the words of Nick Fuentes, literally eradicated.
Yeah.
It's the ugliest part of America. And Liberty, you said it so well. I mean, no part in any political party, in any of the political party, but certainly not in our Republican Party.
Well, we did want to cover that, and if you would like to know some more, this article there is available. As we've mentioned before, we've done booklets on Israel, booklets on anti-Semitism. Redid one on anti-Semitism because I think a lot of this coming for the younger generation has to do with critical theory and seeing maybe the Palestinians as victims, and Israel as the oppressor. And so obviously we've got lots of resources if you'd like to research it. But we're going to move on to some other topics right after this.
Where does moral truth come from? According to 58% of Americans, individuals determine moral truth. A quarter of Generation Z says society determines moral truth, and morality can even change over time. Only 42% of Americans believe that truth comes from God. I don't know about you, but I find these numbers extremely troubling. It really is a crisis of truth, and that crisis has consequences. Look at society. Evil is called good, good called evil. People with biblical beliefs are called bigots, or worse, they're canceled. But there is hope. The Bible promises the truth will set us free, and that's why Point of View is relentless in our commitment to the ultimate source of moral truth, God's Word. At Point of View, we know that God's truth is eternal, and if we stand together, we can help more Americans apply His truth in their daily life. Help Americans find truth again by giving at pointofview.net or call 1-800-347-5151. That's pointofview.net and 800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this. You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is Kerby Anderson.
Back once again, this weekend, maybe get into the area of education. This one is going to cause you to shake your head, roll your eyes, or something. Harvard students weep at being told they're expected to learn. Jeffrey Blahar, I really appreciate some of his lines, but let's put this in some context. On Monday, we had Hutz Hertzberg. Dr. Hertzberg has been an individual that I've known for decades, and he now heads up the educational program at Turning Point USA. But here's the connection back to Jeff Mateer, because he was one of the people speaking at the Department of Justice Religious Liberty Commission. Of course, we had some of the other educators there as well, but he was talking about the importance of education there, giving that testimony along with some of their religious liberty cases. And so I thought it would be good to get Hutz Hertzberg on to talk about the goal of education, to talk about what they're doing there at Turning Point USA. Turning Point USA Education. And again, you can go to the website and find out much more. He was on with us on Monday after we did the interview with Robert Morgan. But this issue of education, which I think Christian schools are trying to recapture, this idea of classical Christian education and really requiring students to be diligently involved, is because here we are, Liberty, you're a teacher and have been a part-time teacher in a Christian school as well. The students are just absolutely weeping. And one said, I was crying, I skipped classes, and I was sobbing in my bed because guess what? They're going to ask me to work and read and study. These are Harvard students who are willing to put their names next to it.
Yeah, I thought that was a good line in the article saying he was surprised they were putting their names to those quotes, and he was going to protect them a little bit by not sharing their names. But seriously, though, I actually read an article in The Atlantic a few months ago talking about the Easy A at colleges like Harvard.
There you go.
And how even in a meeting of Harvard professors, they were laughing at the fact that the average GPA at Harvard was so high because they knew how little students were actually coming to class or doing the reading. And you've seen, other articles we've talked about here that are examining how in even many Ivy League colleges, students aren't reading. They're overwhelmed by the reading load. Professors are having to pare them down. They're not assigning full books anymore. And so it's just, we have really failed kids by putting them in an environment where they have to achieve a lot of what I think are kind of artificial markers of, okay, you can get this grade because you accomplished this thing, but you're kind of checking the box. You're not actually learning how to learn, how to receive new information, how to synthesize it, how to think critically. And so it's very possible for a student to graduate high school with all A's, have a very good GPA, and still go to college, never really having read much or thought very deeply or been challenged to do that. And one of the things, too, one of the problems they've seen at Harvard is that while the workload is lighter than it's ever been and the average GPA is higher than it's ever been, meaning that the A's mean less, students are more stressed out than they've ever been because they know instinctively that their grade's not setting them apart. It's not proving anything because they're not actually doing the work, but they're getting A's in their classes. So now they're working extra hard to do all of these extracurricular activities to try to set them apart, and they're not even doing academics. So now they're trying to reverse course a little bit and be like, maybe at Harvard we should, focus on the academics. And I think one of the quotes from the students was saying, like, how am I going to have fun in my classes? And I can remember a few long nights at Patrick Henry College, and it was not fun. But, it was a good process for my brain. So I think, people just have forgotten how to learn. But really, that's the education system's fault.
One of those quotes is, what makes a Harvard student is their engagement in extracurriculars. Yeah. Now we have to throw them all away and pursue academics. What a concept. I believe these attacks are at the very notion of what Harvard is. And there is a sense of privilege, and having been to one of these schools, I can speak to that a little bit, that I assume that, well, now that I've made it, I don't necessarily have to work as hard. But there was less of that a few decades ago. And now, where everybody gets a trophy, Jeff, it's kind of the way in which these even Ivy League schools have really degenerated.
Okay, so this is for you, Liberty. Trigger warning. I'm just giving you, prepare yourself, right. Buckle up, trigger warning. Not for you personally. It's for it's for the generation you represent and below. I mean, these people are going to have to get a job someday, right? I mean, because not everybody is there because their grandparents have a bunch of money or their parents have made. I mean, some are, but not everybody. Mean, I assume, like, whatever they do, they're going to have to get a job. And when they get a job, they're actually going to have to do something, produce something. Although I will tell you, and this isn't my first, let me exclude, because they may be listening, this isn't any of my First Liberty employees that I love and work with who are outstanding, any current or former First Liberty employees. But maybe my experience in state government with 4,200 employees, I mean, there is a segment who are they can't write, they can't think, and they don't want to work. And so I know just even some others who are in for-profit, in the for-profit world, so many in the generations that you represent, Liberty, and below, are so unprepared to actually be productive in the workforce. And it's causing a lot. Employers are having to do remedial education. We've heard the stories about colleges having kids coming. And I'm sure Patrick Henry, but I've heard stories. Kids who on paper look like they're really, really good and may even done well on the standardized test, but when they come, they just are not ready for college.
Yeah, how to write a paper. And
they're not. And sometimes even the shocking life skills, which, I didn't take a class on life skills. My life skills was my grandmother, I think, was my life skill coach. But my wife would say I needed to take a class. I still really don't know how to do laundry. I can't believe I'm my age and I really. Now, some of that is, and I don't know about Kerby, if you've ever done laundry, maybe you have. Yes. Oh, yeah. Well,
I can't be perfect.
I went from my grandmother taking care of me to my wife taking care of me. And so I've been taken care of by two amazing women in my life.
Never needed it.
But so I needed some life skills. But no, back to the point of the story. And I've seen that and just in my own hiring, again, excluding First Liberty, if everybody gets an A, then you can't tell what an employee is. And then so many come. And I also know this, and this is applaud. I've had for law schools, which these people then end up going to law school because they don't know what to do, so they go to law school because they can't really get a real job, so let's go to law school. And so kids will go to and I've had great employees who've gone to Harvard Law School who've been great lawyers. I've also had as opposing counsel, and you're like, you went to Harvard? Really? How did you do that? And then I've had employees, and then I've had counsel that I've worked with who've gone to what they would say third-tier law schools. And they're as good, if not better. And so
I have noticed
that doesn't matter. The judge doesn't ask you where you went to law school. He or she is looking at your brief, at your argument. I don't know what we're preparing these kids. And as much money as you pay to go to Harvard and not to learn something.
Not to show up to class.
Yeah, and just because everybody gets an A. Yeah. It's just it's ridiculous. And so, the good is great for the Patrick Henry colleges of the world, great for the Hillsdales, but boy, that's a small list.
And I've looked at these lists. Of course, I get the alumni magazine from one of these schools, and I've seen some of the others from Harvard. And some of these kids are just outstanding. Some of them have actually developed patents and developed new technologies. Now, most of it's been in the science area, sadly, not in the humanities and social sciences. So some places they're working really hard and they're producing. And then you feel sorry for them because they're lumped together with all these others that can't write their way out of a paper bag and can't think critically about any particular issue.
Yeah, and so another thing too to think about, I just wrote about this for Outlook magazine, so people will be getting that eventually, but I think it's 86% of students in higher education globally now are using ChatGPT on a regular basis.
To help them think.
They're not actually brainstorming, they're not drafting their own papers, they're not reading the books, they're having ChatGPT summarize it. If they ever had read a book to begin with, they're certainly not now. And so, it is really a failure to prepare people for the real world, like Jeff was saying.
You set me up because after the break, we're going to talk about AI to pick apples. It's not working out so well. But matter of fact, just a preview, we do have upcoming Outlook on artificial intelligence and some really interesting things there. But if you think that robots are going to take over, well, this one will encourage you to find maybe sometimes robots don't do so well. And then, of course, we got Penn and Dexter's commentary about reforming college rankings, which in light of what we just said, I think is very apropos. We'll come back with that final segment right after this.
Our universities have been moving leftward for decades. William F. Buckley warned of the drift in his 1951 book, God and Man at Yale. conservatives advocating reform have mostly been ignored. Families who want to avoid the prevailing leftist indoctrination can seek out Christian colleges or schools that refuse federal funding. But most chose based upon prestige, family legacies, or scholarship offers. Many parents were unaware of how socialists' long march through the institutions would affect their offspring. After the 2020 George Floyd riots, universities ramped up their DEI policies. Then, 2 years ago, campus celebrations of Hamas terror began. University officials were interrogated. Their masks came off. Some schools lost federal funding. Others face the possibility of losing such subsidies. Earlier this year, the Manhattan Institute's Christopher Rufo brought together 40-plus scholars, intellectuals, and policy leaders to formulate what he calls a practical vision for reform. They came up with the Manhattan Statement on Higher Education. Consequently, in early October, the White House offered universities a compact under which, in order to receive funding preferences, universities must return to their historic duty to advance the public good. Now, Manhattan Institute's City Journal has come out with a report which assesses schools on qualities that go well beyond those measured in U.S. News and World Report and other traditional college rankings. The report measures free speech, how the school handles politics on campus, and students' professional success after graduation. A Wall Street Journal editorial praises the new report for awarding higher marks to colleges that have demonstrated ideological pluralism among the faculty, for their vibrant and inclusive campus social life, and for fostering student tolerance for controversial speakers. No surprise, not one Ivy League school made the top 10. For Point of View, I'm Penna Dexter.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Back for a few more minutes. Those of you that listen to this program on computer probably just heard Penna Dexter's commentary, because we play it on Fridays in the last hour, first and the second hour, and the break just before the top of the hour. And this one is about reforming college rankings, which we had talked about the other day, which was so striking because if you look at the way U.S. News and World Report ranks various schools, I think you just heard why we don't necessarily think there's some of the best. But if you start looking at things like free speech and how they handle political issues, their success after graduation and the rest, as we pointed out the other day, you had 2 schools in Texas, 2 schools in Georgia, 2 schools in Florida, as well as and 2 schools in Indiana, and then 1 in North Carolina, 1 in South Carolina. What do they have in common? Well, they're all red states. They all have really pretty good governors, Ron DeSantis and everything. And, of course, the number 1, University of Florida, that's Ben Sasse, who was the president there.
Yeah,
so you can see that. So we'll get to that in just a minute in some of the details. But real quickly, I just thought I'd mention that one of the articles we've posted, Liberty, is because we have an article coming out on AI and robots and all that. But if you think robots are going to be doing a lot of the arduous farm work, probably not. This one, how does a robot pick an apple? Well, not very well, it turns out. And of course, when you're talking about certain kinds of fruits and vegetables, that doesn't work well at all, whether you're talking about strawberries and peaches and a variety of other things. But they've been trying since right now it's harvest time. those of you in the state of Washington, New York, or Michigan, especially up there in Michigan, a lot of apples coming down. 11 billion pounds of apples. Wow. But trying to get a robot machine to go through there and pick those up, that works well on row crops like corn and soybeans. Not so good on peaches, asparagus, and apparently not so good on apples.
It's almost like you need somebody who has a real brain to be able to look and see, where the apples are, what do I need to, grab it, and, things like that. So what's interesting is that I think people maybe optimistically think that in this coming, technological revolution, that you will have more time for creativity because these menial tasks, AI and put into a robot will be able to take care of. But what we're actually seeing is more people using it for talking to, actually, like a companion, or just thinking and doing their schoolwork, doing their writing, doing their work. So the things that people say, oh, we'll have more time for this and that, that's what ChatGPT is doing. The robot that's out there in the apple orchard isn't actually pulling down any apples, which I think there's some value in doing some farm labor, though. So anyway, it's interesting to see what is actually being replaced and what can't be replaced.
If nothing else, because we have a shrinking supply of pickers and rising labor costs, apples are going to go through the roof, maybe like eggs. But the most promising model we have, Jeff, is a robot with 12 arms, if you can imagine, 6 on each side, bearing a camera and suction cups. But so far, the robotic harvesters are slower than human workers and make a whole lot more errors. So I don't think AI or robots are going to take over some kinds of harvesting in agriculture anytime soon.
You've made me very hungry for an apple pie.
Yes.
So I don't know if we have apple pie. We can get some apple pie sent to us. But I was thinking what they need to do, do you remember, and Liberty probably doesn't remember this cartoon, but remember the maid on George Jetson?
Yes.
So the maid had all these different things she could do.
I actually know what you're talking
you
about.
do? Okay, all right. That's good. That's good. But remember, she could do like lots of different things. So someone needs to have the maid from George Jetson. The other is, I mean, part of the point is, well, and this is from the Wall Street Journal, so it's a reputable source of an article. But I sort of the underlying was, well, because we're curtailing immigration.
Yes, that's what they're getting at.
That we're having a shortage, and the reason we're curtailing is we thought AI would do it, and sort of almost implying again, and this is the Wall Street Journal, almost implying that the Trump administration's policies of immigration are having, and it is unintended consequence. But I also go back to, well, we've as I said earlier, we have 43 million Americans who are on food stamps. So obviously, some portion of those are people who can't work. They're mothers with children at home or whatever. But there is a portion who I would suspect can work, who are able-bodied. Well, guess what? There's a job. You pick, and I've done some. I've picked oranges before, and that is that's hard. And I've gone to orchards and had a family that had an apple tree, and it's not easy work. There's not, and the people who can do it really quickly, and I guess that's why they can beat the robots. But if we do have people who are unemployed who are able to work, this is a job.
It is.
And
Good
so
point.
I didn't like tying it to immigration. I think we have laws during. And again, if people are here legally who want to work, then they should be able to work. The fact that we somehow need to have illegal immigration because we want apple pie, I don't like that connection.
I don't think it's a good connection. And also, like the Wall Street Journal also reported just earlier this year how many young men are out of work. They're either dropped out of college or they moved back home. And I understand, if you have a degree, you had certain plans, you wanted to get the office job and things like that. But there is work, and so for people who are out of a job,
those Harvard kids who aren't learning anything, they can go pick apples.
I think we got the answer.
Yeah, there it is.
I think you got it. Well, again, I just put that out there because we're going to be having this issue. I think, is it the December issue?
Maybe January.
Or January issue on artificial intelligence, so be looking for that. And it isn't always the panacea that we thought it was. But just before we wind down, again, reforming the college rankings. Now, this one, Liberty, was really just for the state colleges because we, the other day, had somebody on from one one of the very prestigious Christian schools. She mentions Hillsdale there, Grove City College. Of course, you just mentioned Patrick Henry. We can mention so many others along the way. But if you're thinking of going to a state school, you might look at the Manhattan list, because in some respects, I think it's a better list.
Yeah, and I would encourage people too, like there is a lot wrong with higher education, but there's also a lot of value in higher education done rightly. And there are certain career paths that if you aspire to something, then you are going to need quality higher education. So don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Look at the colleges that aren't doing so well, and then look at the colleges that are actually focused on learning and that allow free speech and don't have some crazy policies that make that impossible.
No, I think that's great advice. And the other is, go and visit and ask these questions. I've got a niece who's going through that process now, and just strongly encouraged her to look at lots of different schools, ask the questions. Where are the graduates going? What are you actually doing in class, and learn? So I think those are really, really important.
Even go sit in the back of a room of a class and see what it really looks like, and ask a few students and all that. It is a difficult task, but it's probably more important than ever, because Liberty, as we've pointed out before, the number of individuals with student loan debts is increased dramatically. And so never has there been a bigger investment of your time and money than going to college, which is why some should think about maybe not going to college.
Well, and that's exactly what I was going to say. There's nothing wrong. It's an honorable profession to be a plumber or electrician, and anytime we call one of those, it is an honorable profession, because based upon what we pay.
I'll guarantee you, AI is never going to be able to weld things. AI is never going to be able to do plumbing, and there's just a few industries there. I've worked in a machine shop, so I know a little bit about that as well. Coming down to the end, and first of all, I knew it was Halloween because Megan every day has been wearing a different Halloween outfit. She's wearing one today. We ought to put that on camera. But nevertheless, we certainly know that is the case. But it's also Reformation Day and a variety of other things. So whether you go out trick-or-treating or not, I hope you'll enjoy the weekend. Next week, Liberty, you're on Monday. And then people hear me Wednesday, hopefully, if the planes work out, a live broadcast from New Mexico. I want to thank Megan for help engineering the program. Steve, thank you for producing the program. See you back here Monday, right here on Point of View.
It was not that long ago that censorship appeared to be almost inevitable. Free speech was being attacked and strangled in many places. And some of us wondered if this was the end. But now, many feel a new sense of hope, a chance for a fresh dawn. Let me caution you. Now is not the time to relax. It's a time to press forward, to use this fresh opportunity to proclaim and learn how to apply truth to current issues. By the fact you're here, listening right now, that tells me that you recognize the vital role Point of View plays as a voice of truth. For more than 50 years, we've informed and equipped people who have made a real difference. And when you give to Point of View today, you breathe life into what can be a new golden era for the truth. Please take a moment right now and invest in truth. Visit pointofview.net or give it 1-800-347-5151. That's pointofview.net. Click in now or call 1-800-347-5151. Point of View is produced by Point of View Ministries.